I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we're going to be looking at the Best Director category, breaking it down, giving my predictions, as well as some important information later on in the show. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is this. Pick a category, and I predict what I think is going to get nominated for the 2022 Oscars. But the show is also more than that. We'll be having Critics' Choice predictions and reactions, and of course the Golden Globes somewhat are going to be happening this year. So it's more overall an award season channel. But this main series, you can expect every single week, breaking down all the categories, what I think is going to get nominated in all the categories, including some, updates later on when we get the nominations, reactions, things like that. You guys have been showing a lot of support for the videos of all the acting categories, so please do keep that up here for more of the technical categories. And the first one being Best Director. Now, Best Director is a category that is, for the most part, kind of the same every year. Most of the years, the supporting categories are hard to predict. There's usually a couple of lead performances that are sort of out in front and sort of get the attention and eventually get the Oscars. And the director's category, the sort of stereotype, I guess, and what I found over the years is that there's really a solid 3 or 4 nominations. But that fifth slot nomination is really up in the air all the way until the Oscars night. And in the past few years, we've had some real surprises when it comes to that final slot of who gets nominated. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the show. But jumping things off, my first prediction and my frontrunner to win Best Director is Jane Campion from The Power of the Dog. Now, in this category, I think more than other, it really helps to have a critical appreciation for the movie. That sometimes you see, Bohemian Rhapsody, which is not a well-liked movie, but it wins a bunch of Oscars and Best Lead Actor, but, it wasn't nominated for something like directing, because I think oftentimes the critically appreciated movie gets nominated for directing because there's a lot of stuff written about it, and the critics can sort of talk about how well directed it is, and that sort of momentum kind of carries through, and I think that's an important thing for critics, whereas the audiences maybe just care about sort of the general feelings of the story. So what really helps with Jane Campion, I think, is twofold. Both the quality of the movie, but also the narrative of her potential campaign. Starting off that quality of the movie, I've had a chance to see the movie at the Toronto International Film Festival. Should be coming out, I guess, this Friday on Netflix, so for everyone to see. So you'll be able to understand what I'm seeing in it, in which I think is a really well-directed movie in the sense that everything is incongruous with each other. The fact that the acting, the technical craft are all sort of in control. And it's almost sort of a difficult thing to mention it. You sort of know it when you see it. But this is a movie that you clearly can tell is from an incredibly talented filmmaker, one of our best female filmmakers and directors living. And I think we'll talk about that in the narrative section, but in terms of the quality of the movie, there's a real control of the movie. There's a real understanding that maybe I don't know where this is going, but I still trust the director in leading me to that role. Oftentimes when we get directing nominations, we get it from movies that are serious contenders. I expect Power of the Dog to be a serious contender because I think it is the Netflix kind of auteur slot. We've seen in the past few years, whether it be 2018's Roma or 2019's The Irishman or last year with Mank, these movies distributed by Netflix that are long, that are sort of more artistic, and they're very personal, auteur-driven kind of a movie, and they often get a lot of nominations and wins. So I think that this year will be the Netflix's sort of slot of that. And just based on recent history, we've seen Netflix do a very good job campaigning and getting these movies a lot of rewards. So for the beautiful framing, the steady pace, the tight, controlled story and how it sort of drags you along, and its subtle approaches on masculinity, and just the fact that I think there could be potentially 4 nominations from this movie. So it has the support from the acting branch. It's a period piece, so I do think it should get a few technical nominations. It has Netflix behind it, which we've seen in the past do very well on the awards circuit. So The Power of the Dog seems to be that sort of Mank, Roma kind of a slot. I think Jane Campion can benefit off of that in terms of just the quality of the movie. But furthermore, I also think she has a strong narrative because, Jane Campion hasn't made a feature film in 11 years. This is a bit of a mini comeback for her, a reminder for everybody that she's a really talented filmmaker, because her past couple movies, Bright Star was a little bit more of a smaller movie. In the Cut was sort of a more high-profile movie, but wasn't as well appreciated. But, Jane Campion won an Oscar for The Piano and was seen as this really talented filmmaker, and I think we're sort of just being reminded of her gifts once again here with The Power of the Dog. So I think the Academy follows through once again, awarding it to a woman for directing for the second year in a row, to sort of one of the great directors in Jane Campion, and a reminder here in The Power of the Dog of just the mastery and control that she can exhibit in a film. Then in my second nomination, I'm going to go with Kenneth Branagh from Belfast. I'm pretty confident that Belfast is, if not the Best Picture frontrunner, one of the frontrunners. Did very well in Toronto, winning the People's Choice Award, which is a very indicative award for getting a Best Picture nomination. It's positioned well in terms of it being a very populist movie and potentially getting some acting nominations, and has that sort of personal touch. However, I think I have a little bit more of a hesitation in terms of giving him the win, even though I think this is maybe the Best Picture frontrunner, just because we've seen in past years serious Best Picture contenders and Best Picture winners. I'm thinking about Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Green Book, last year's The Trial of Chicago 7. All those movies were sort of serious Best Picture contenders, yet none of their directors got nominated because the movies weren't necessarily super flashy or have a distinct personal style. I would argue against that with something like Three Billboards, but Peter Farrelly, Green Book wins Best Picture, he doesn't even get nominated for Best Director, which wouldn't have happened, in the 60s or the 70s, but does more so nowadays. And I think Kenneth Branagh, because he very much allows the story to breathe, and it's about really the story and the humor and the dialogue and the acting, there's not too much attention drawn to the directing. However, I do have him in second place here because I think there are a couple things that sort of stand him apart from some of those past serious Best Picture contenders whose directors didn't get nominated, and those being that this is a personal story, that oftentimes, whether it be David Fincher for Mank or Alfonso Cuarón for Roma, who won the Best Director Oscar, often people are comparing Roma and Belfast. This is almost Kenneth Branagh's Roma, in the sense that this is shot in black and white, so there's an interesting stylistic flourish, a directorial flourish I think the Academy will appreciate, and the director's branch will appreciate, and this is also a sort of semi-autobiographical personal story, that this is about kind of Kenneth Branagh's time growing up in Northern Ireland and then eventually moving to England. So there has the personal connection to it. I do think the movie's very well liked and will be well liked, if not the frontrunner to win Best Picture. And then I also think that this is a strong movie overall with strong acting. And when we talk about the Best Director nominees, you want to pick a movie that could even win Best Picture, that usually gets a lot of above the line support. So similar to The Power of the Dog, I do think Belfast can get, potentially 4 acting nominations. I do think it gets in for screenplay, even editing. I do think this is a real contender. I have some concerns, but also Kenneth Branagh as a previous nominee for Henry V. So he's also not in the movie, so it's not like a Bradley Cooper kind of situation where they could reward him in one sense. And I do think that Kenneth potentially could win in this category, but should get nominated. Then in my third slot, I went with Paul Thomas Anderson from Licorice Pizza. Now, it will be interesting to see how this movie sort of survives. It's a little bit of an initial backlash in the sense that there's maybe an inappropriate romance at the center of the movie. However, I do think that the Paul Thomas Anderson fans will ultimately sort of overcome that and get that nomination. This is a guy who is very well respected within the industry, has been for a long time, seen as one of sort of the great modern young living directors, whether it be There Will Be Blood and his nomination there, or even going back to Magnolia or Boogie Nights. He is a well-respected director. And let's not forget his last movie, Phantom Thread. He got nominated for Best Directing in sort of a surprise nomination. So Licorice Pizza here coming out at the right time. Then this limited release should be campaigned heavily. I expect this movie to do well. I think Paul Thomas Anderson is a frontrunner to win for Best Screenplay. I think this could get in for Best Picture. There could be even, potential for Bradley Cooper for supporting actor, Alana Haim for getting in for Best Actress. So there are a couple things here where the reason why it's number 3 on the list, I think, is because we're not exactly sure in terms of the acting nominations. Oftentimes directing nominations pair up very well with acting nominations, and there's no guarantee on that sense. And there is a little bit of a backlash, but the truth of the matter is that he is a very well-respected director. He has been nominated 8 times. He has yet to win an Oscar. This is a coming-of-age movie, and this is the coming-of-age genre is a very well-respected genre, whether it be Jojo Rabbit or Boyhood or Lady Bird. This genre definitely really connects with the Academy members, and I think Licorice Pizza will do so as well. Furthermore, this is also kind of a personal story for him. The set in the San Fernando Valley where he grew up. The leads are related to him in a sense. I mean, Cooper Hoffman is Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, and Philip Seymour Hoffman has been in almost every one of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies until he passed away. And then someone like Alana Haim, she's from the band Haim with her 3 sisters, and Paul Thomas Anderson has directed a lot of their music videos. Their mother was his art teacher. So there's very much this kind of personal connection, I think, that they can leverage throughout the campaign to make it feel a little bit more of his style. And Paul Thomas Anderson at this point has developed a unique style, and people know what kind of a movie they're getting themselves into, and it seems to be a little bit more crowd-pleasing than something like The Master, even, in terms of it's more of a Boogie Nights, Punch Drunk Love kind of an energy. So I expect at least probably one acting nomination, a frontrunner for Best Screenplay, a genre that generally the Academy likes, from a person that the Academy also really appreciates. This is not necessarily a slam dunk, but I do feel right now confident in Paul Thomas Anderson's chances of getting in for Best Director. Then in my fourth slot, I've gone with Denis Villeneuve from Dune. Now, this is a slot that maybe I'm a little bit more comfortable in on some respects, but also not. Like I mentioned, most of the time, the Best Directing category goes to movies that have a real shot of winning Best Picture, or in the sort of top 5. And I think that Dune, while is a well-appreciated movie, I'm not exactly sure if it'll be well-appreciated by the entire group of the Academy. I mean, this is a hard sci-fi epic kind of a movie. That being said, I still have it here in my number 4 slot because I think this is going to fit into the Christopher Nolan Dunkirk, Sam Mendes 1917, George Miller Mad Max Fury Road slot is what I'm calling it. Essentially, a director who is very well respected, who's working on a large canvas, who's doing a lot, whether it be action in Mad Max or 1917 or war, and is so well appreciated for the technical elements that the above-the-line stuff doesn't really matter. I mean, if you look at something like Mad Max, that didn't get nominated for writing. Dunkirk didn't get nominated for writing. They didn't have any acting nominations, similarly with 1917. Yet the filmmaking is so sort of terrific and epic and grand, is so well respected from a technical side that it ultimately gets in for the nomination. Now, we have to remember this year that there's 10 possible nominations for Best Picture, so I do think that Dune will be the sort of blockbuster slot. It is the most prestige of all of them, unless something like The Matrix totally blows us away. This was a movie that there was a little bit of concern over the success, but it did very well at the box office. It's going to get a sequel. Denis Villeneuve is a well-respected director who's been nominated before for Arrival, so I expect a lot of technical nominations, even technical wins. Could get him in with something like editing too, and I think Denis is such a well-respected technical craftsman alone that he's one of the few people, along with someone like a Christopher Nolan, that can do these amazing sort of large-scale things and make them feel a little bit more adult and dramatic and artistic. So I think he will get in for Dune, although I am a little bit concerned because it doesn't really have all that above-the-line support. And then in my final slot, I went with Guillermo del Toro for Nightmare Alley, which is this fifth slot's really sort of fluid in the sense that it could be Del Toro one day, and the next day it could be McKay, and then whatnot. I'll be talking about some of my possible contenders later, but the reason why I'm a little bit concerned right now is just because we haven't seen Nightmare Alley. No one's really seen Nightmare Alley at the time of this recording, so I'm not exactly sure about the first impressions or the reviews or if this movie is even good. Oftentimes, these sort of best director, now Guillermo del Toro, his last movie, The Shape of Water, won Best Picture and won him Best Director. So he's a very well-respected, very well-appreciated member of the Academy. However, that's not necessarily a guarantee. I mean, we've seen guys like Damien Chazelle, his follow-up with First Man, not get nominated. And we've seen other sort of Best Directing winners not get nominated the next year. It's not like a guarantee that, oh, you won the last movie, so you'll at least get nominated here. It doesn't necessarily work like that. However, it has worked like that for, friends of Del Toro and other Mexican filmmakers, Alfonso Cuarón and Alejandro Iñárritu. So there's a chance in that sense, and we know how Del Toro is very well appreciated, and once he sort of gets on the circuit, he's one of these great orators, I think, of explaining film and talking about his films. He really gives you a sense of passion towards it. However, right now I have him in the fifth slot just because no one's really seen the movie. I do have some concerns over Bradley Cooper, I think, is falling maybe out of the slot of Best Lead Actor. Cate Blanchett, I'm not sure if she's going to get in for Best Supporting Actress. So there's some of these slots where, one thing leads to another. Like, what if Cooper doesn't get in for lead, and then Blanchett doesn't get in for supporting, and then it's not going to get in for writing, and then maybe it gets a surprise loss in cinematography, and then the question becomes, will Del Toro be so well appreciated that he'll get nominated for director in the quote-unquote technical slot? Right now I have Denis in that technical slot, and I'm not exactly sure if Nightmare Alley will be enough of a grand scale production that will be appreciated enough to get him that Best Director nomination, which is why I think the possible contenders this year are a real challenge. But also this is from Searchlight, who has a real terrific track record of getting films nominated and picking great movies and campaigning them. And it seems like Nightmare Alley is going to be their campaign for this year. So I do expect Del Toro to be at least in the conversation. Then my first possible contender is Adam McKay for Don't Look Up. And let's not remember the Vice year. If you go back to the 2019 Old Oscar Countdown series, I had Adam McKay in my 5th slot for Vice in terms of getting nominated, and that was kind of an unsure thing because no one had seen the movie, and we're almost in the exact same position where Vice was a last-minute release, and I think people are sort of underestimating it, and then it came out, and then he got nominated for Best Director, and it got all these acting nominations, and it was a really well-appreciated movie. And Don't Look Up could be the similar thing, because the big concern that I have, and I think everyone else has, is that how much of this movie is a comedy. Big Short and Vice were political and economic, and they were having these larger social issues. But it seems to be like Don't Look Up is also a comedy, yes, but also very much a kind of a social issues movie as well, and will have some of the more serious moments to it. So I think McKay's movie will get ultimately nominated for Best Picture. The concerns now is no one's really seen it. Is this a situation where Jennifer Lawrence and Leonardo DiCaprio can get nominated? Is there a surprise, amazing performance from Meryl Streep, of course, who can get in for Best Supporting Actress? That category is so up in the air, where it's a scenario where, hey, Leonardo DiCaprio maybe doesn't get nominated, and Meryl Streep doesn't get nominated, and Don't Look Up is not a real threat. Or it comes out, it's backed by Netflix, Leo's a sure lock, Meryl gets a surprise nomination, I think it's going to get in for editing, I definitely think it's going to get in for writing, and then, well, what's next? Adam McKay for director, having that signature brand of comedy. His last 2 movies were nominated for Best Director. So that alone, I think, gives it a real sort of strong dark horse chance. But right now it's a possible contender just because I'm not sure if they want to reward sort of McKay with another nomination once again. And ultimately, we're not exactly sure about the quality of the movie. But the quality of the movie may not matter because a movie like Vice had mixed critical response, yet did very well at the Oscars. Then in my final possible contender slot, I went with Julia Ducournau from Titane. And this is a movie that I saw at TIFF and kind of initially wrote off because it's such a strange and odd movie, and I didn't think it would really resonate with Academy members. But I'm sort of putting her here because this is the international wildcard slot. Now, the past 3 years, I would argue, we've seen a huge support from international directors. Last year, the sort of surprise Thomas Vinterberg nomination happened for another round. A couple of years before that, Paweł Pawlikowski had a surprise nomination for Cold War. And you could even argue Bong Joon-ho's win for Best Director kind of upset the Sam Mendes kind of frontrunner for Best Director. That has this sort of international push too. So there seems to be, within the director's branch, a large amount of international presence and appreciation for these directors, where if you look at something like the DGA nominations, that's the Directors Guild of America, Vinterberg and Paweł Pawlikowski, they don't get nominated. But if you look at the BAFTA nominations, they got nominated every year. So that may be something to monitor this year in terms of the BAFTA nominations. Maybe Julia Ducournau gets nominated there, and then that's telling for her sign for Best Director. But the truth is, it could be, someone like Pedro Almodovar for Parallel Mothers. It could be Joaquin Trier for The Worst Person in the World can get this sort of surprise international wildcard slot, which is why I don't totally love predicting it, because there are a lot of opportunities, but it is a trend I think we need to respect and acknowledge. And why I think it's Julia Ducournau has the best chance is because this movie, I think, is singularly directed. I think this is an incredibly creative and unique and absolutely her movie, in the sense that no one else could have made this movie, and this has the sort of festival appreciation behind it. It won the Palme d'Or, it played at TIFF and won a Midnight Madness award there, so there is an appreciation already critically and in terms of the festival-wise. I was surprised to see that France selected this as its official entry for the international feature category, so they are trying to campaign this as a serious artistic work, even though it's crazy and weird and it's going to definitely turn off a lot of people. It could have enough support from the director's branch just because of how strange and odd and totally unique it is to Ducournau as this sort of burgeoning film talent that I think will ultimately puts her ahead of someone like an Almodovar or Joaquin Trier. And I think that Titane is a potential contender even to win for Best International Feature. Hard to tell right now, but I do think it does get nominated. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on the Best Director category. So essentially the next bit of a schedule is going to be a little bit more broadened out in the sense that we're going to be talking about screenplay predictions and then Critics' Choice. I'm going to doing some reactions and sort of follow along. So please let me know in the comments down below, what kind of things do you want me to cover? Would you be interested in seeing a Critics' Choice reactions video, or even a predictions video, or Golden Globes, even if it's a list? Do you want me to react to those kinds of things? I will sort of try to follow up with, you know, SAG and PGA, because those are the important things. But in terms of dedicated videos, just want to sort of judge and to see your interest in that kind of stuff, if you stuck around this long. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.